It is no secret that our world has become divided. From the United States to the Middle East, people form their identities in opposition to one another. Democrats versus Republicans, Arabs versus Jews, Protestants versus Catholics. Our world is revolving around hate, how we can bring others who are different from us down and ourselves up. Something has to give. Something must be done to mitigate this profound landscape of hate speech and to mitigate the differences we see in one another. UNESCO was founded in the wake of World War II and the Holocaust with the mission to mitigate hate speech around the globe and to foster peace between nations by collaborating in the work of advancing the mutual knowledge and understanding of peoples. Central to this mission is empathy. But what is empathy? How do people see empathy? How do they enact it? And how is it received? I conducted my anthropological field research in Galway, Ireland, interviewing members of UNESCO and other participants who engaged in empathy education for youth. This led me to a cross-cultural study of the intersection between empathy and agency, with members of UNESCO in Ireland working closely with members in the United States. I wanted to understand how they viewed empathy, if it differed across these two field sites, and how they were enacting it through various formal and informal education efforts. This research will reveal how members of UNESCO are fostering empathy by providing a space for youth agency to mitigate hate speech and to foster cultural shifts towards inclusion. UNESCO and its members have put their ideologies into practice by giving youth a space to learn and practice pro-social actions. Due to what Eric, one of my main participants, a UNESCO chair in Ireland, firmly believes to be a large intergenerational divide between young people and adults in Ireland, youth are considered to be marginalized because they are seen as less than full adults, and therefore Eric has said, basically, it's an overstatement to say, oh, we don't want young people to be into hate speech and all of these things. That's an oversimplification of the issue. I think it's a bit more, it depends on your biography, how you look at these things. If your biography is one where you feel marginalized or poor outside, then it's much easier to empathize with this if you're privileged, right? So it's really about getting to people who are less privileged. Despite youth disproportionately facing economic inequality, high unemployment rates, and housing issues, they are politically and culturally underrepresented in parliament and media discourses. Eric and UNESCO believe that by endorsing youth as full adults, it will help to mitigate the marginalization they feel as less than full adults in society. On their website, UNESCO has positioned youth as a priority group, recognizing their creativity, innovation, and capacity to make change happen in the world, and believing that young people are crucial actors, leaders, and partners, and are committed to accompanying them in fighting inequality, contributing to sustainable development, and building peace. Here, they're situating youth as powerful actors and are acknowledging them as autonomous individuals that have the capacity to drive initiatives and shape policy. In doing so, they are acknowledging the youth's agency, the ability to make decisions, take action, and exert influence in one's own life, community, and society. UNESCO is working actively to ensure that their voices are heard because they matter. In this way, youths are viewed as a legitimate state of being in and for the world, instead of a transitional life state devoid of any intrinsic meaning or value. Within UNESCO, youth are being validated as full humans that have the capacity to enact change and to realize their goal of including young people in civic society and facilitating their social action. Eric, in partnership with Brian, the UNESCO chair in the United States, founded the Youth as Researchers program, where young people get the space to explore what they think is important, not what adults think is important. And they get solidarity from doing that research with other young people, rather than adults doing it at young people. In this way, they're challenging traditional hierarchies of power between adults and young people, shifting the top-down dynamic to a horizontal one between the youths themselves and fostering interaction between young people. Eric told me of a group of youths that participated in the Youth as Researchers program. They researched LGBTQ attitudes in Catholic rural Ireland, and their research together was so powerful that it led to the development of tolerance in schools towards people who are gay or LGBTQ, and it actually led to the first Pride Parade in the county. Youth are engaging with the agency that they have been presented with in a landscape of otherwise intergenerational hierarchy and are enacting change. Both Eric and Brian understand empathy as a step beyond sympathy. Sympathy is merely feeling bad for someone, while empathy is emotion turned into action. Eric and Brian believe that empathy will have a ripple effect. One empathetic act will inspire another, and so on. Their ideologies of empathy trickle down from theory to practice, as demonstrated by this instance, where during a flood in Ireland, youth from the Youth as Researchers program helped elderly residents rebuild their flooded homes. Ireland has a large intergenerational divide, with resentments between generations, and young people often being seen as troublemakers by the older generation. Despite this, when the older population needed help, a couple of these youth researchers stepped in because if I were flooded, I would want someone to help me, so I might as well go help them. They turned their understanding of another person's situation into action, and they were joined by other youth that had not participated in the program, who had seen what they were doing and wanted to help. All of these young people put themselves in the shoes of others, spurring action even when they knew they might not be appreciated for it. They simply did it because they said it was the right thing to do, and that we were all in one boat. Despite these generational tensions, these youth reached across the divide, and their actions even shifted older people's perceptions that not all young people are bad. These youth connected themselves with a dissimilar other and imagined and internalized what the other was experiencing. And while most actions might not be as large as this, it shows how UNESCO and its members' theory is trickling down into practice and how this practice ripples out towards others. In this instance, understanding, connection, and integration between generations occurred, spurred by youth's agency to act. Eric believes that fear of the other is the absence of empathy, and the integration of people is how you prevent hate, and that today, our landscape of hate speech is equivalent to the landscape of hate speech during the Holocaust. Similarly, Brian believes that empathy is the cornerstone of peace building. He says, "We've got to try to understand each other. We don't have to like each other. We just have to talk to each other." To mitigate this profound landscape of hate speech, Eric, Brian, and other researchers have enacted agency through formal empathy education program, activating social empathy. This program has been executed in Ireland for secondary school youth and in the United States for undergraduate students. For Eric, empathy is like a muscle you have to train and practice, and this program gives youth the opportunity to do so. The curriculum is designed to be student-led as far as possible. Students should be encouraged to choose activities, to adapt activities to their own interests, and to exercise their own creativity in completing activities, and to direct their own project work. Again, here they are enacting agency as an avenue for youth to learn and practice empathy among themselves. The program explicitly defines empathy as the ability to understand what other people are feeling and thinking, and to share their feelings and emotions. It also involves understanding another person's perspective. This includes being able to recognize that different people respond differently to things, and feeling an emotional, visceral response. One way empathy is understood in anthropological frameworks is as a first-person-like experiential understanding of another person's perspective. That is also a process that requires ongoing dialogue for its accuracy. Experiential understanding involves more than just knowing something by reading or hearing about it. It involves experiencing another's emotions by internalizing their experiences through their words, actions, facial expressions, and body language. The program is trying to cultivate this experiential understanding through role-playing exercises and hypothetical scenarios. These activities allow students to actively imagine and feel what it would be like to live in somebody else's life. One of these role-playing identities involves a 13-year-old boy who is an Irish traveler and struggling to stay in school due to his circumstances. Irish travelers are an indigenous ethnic minority that have been subject to systematic exclusion and prejudice, with negative stereotypes about them persisting. And by having students role-play a young traveler, they're asked to think about how their circumstances make them feel and how others can help them move forward, rather than merely understanding them by their differences. This activity sets up the constraints that Irish travelers are faced with on a daily basis, including harassment, lack of job opportunities, housing opportunities, and education access. In this way, youth are given the space to imagine what it would be like as a young Irish traveler and to formulate their own emotional responses to the situation. They are then prompted to discuss actions they could take to support those who have less access to resources than others. And youth that have participated in such activities have said, "I liked how we got to understand why people act certain ways, and how to show empathy to a person you know very little about, but always keep in mind everybody has their own problems. I also liked how we got to learn about different people's life. And I liked learning about stereotypes as it opened my eyes more to stereotypes I make about people in day-to-day life." These activities go beyond telling youth about how to understand others, and it cultivates imaginative engagement with dissimilar others. Essentially, they're able to imagine themselves in the shoes of others, and these youth have said that they learned how to put yourself in people's shoes before you judge them, and that they now know how to help and communicate with others. Through my anthropological analysis, I found that UNESCO and my participants view empathy not just as a moral virtue, but a critical skill for mitigating social issues. Empathy is something that can be cultivated, and agency is a powerful way to enact this. UNESCO has positioned youth as powerful actors in society rather than adults in waiting. In this way, they are decreasing the marginalization that youth feel as being less than adults and fostering their empathy towards others. Eric and Brian have integrated empathy into educational frameworks as a skill just as necessary as math or science. To them, empathy is an actionable measure against social issues such as hate speech, intolerance, and polarizing conflicts that we see all too often in our world, and youth have the agency to mitigate this. Through these programs, youth have not only embodied the concept of empathy, but have taken empathetic action. In a world that has become increasingly polarizing, empathy can be a powerful tool to mitigate hate speech and foster a deeper understanding of one another, allowing people to interact in more positive ways and build a more connected and inclusive society.